She should have walked away the moment she felt the silence. But she didn't. She stood her ground, barefoot, hands shaking, breath catching in the cold, because deep down, some broken part of her still hoped that maybe this time he'd see her, that this time the bond would spark, that something, anything, would finally go right. But Jackson didn't even flinch. "You're not my mate," he said. Just that. Loud enough for the entire pack to hear, clear enough to slice through the ceremony like a blade. 200 wolves watching. One girl standing there, heart bleeding on the ground, and not a single voice came to her defense. No gasp, no protest, just silence, like everyone had been expecting it. 7. That was number 7. 7 times she'd stood in a circle like this, offering her hand, her heart, her wolf, only to be denied. 7 times she was told she wasn't enough. Weak, broken, unbonded, unworthy. Jackson didn't even look at her as he walked away. Lissa, his new intended, stood near the edge of the crowd, smirking like she'd won something. And maybe she had, because Riley was done. No more rejections, no more chances, no more pack. The elders delivered the decree like reading off a grocery list. Riley Ashwood, unbonded, unclaimed, exiled by failure of mate bond. That was it. No hearing, no defense, no goodbye, just her name, a label, and exile. The guards tore the ceremonial cloak from her shoulders, stripped her of her sigil, and dropped a cracked water flask in her hand. Then they marched her to the border. No protection rune, no farewell. They didn't even bother to point her in a direction. Just tossed her into the trees like a dying ember no one cared to watch burn out. The cold hit her instantly. She kept walking, past Crescent Ridge's boundary stones, past the safe hunting zones, past anything remotely civilized. Her wolf, Mira, was silent, too weak to shift, too broken to fight back. Every step felt heavier than the last. Her thoughts blurred. Her hands were bleeding, but she didn't stop. She couldn't, because the moment she stopped, that would be it. No one was coming to find her. No one ever had. By the second night, the storm hit. Snow, thick and wet, soaked through her torn clothes. Her feet were numb, her vision doubled, and the wind howled like something feral. She collapsed under a crooked pine tree, breath shaking, fingers curled, whispering a name no one else remembered, her own. She didn't cry. Not because she was strong, but because there was nothing left. The tears had dried up 4 rejections ago. And then came the dark. Not just sleep, not rest. The kind of dark you don't wake up from. The kind where the world goes silent, and you start to wonder if anyone would even notice if your heart stopped. But someone did notice. She woke to firelight, the scent of pine smoke, burning herbs, leather, and him. He stood in the shadows just beyond the flame, massive, silent, watching her like a wild animal waiting to pounce. He didn't speak at first, just stared. And then, finally, "You crossed into Shadowmoor." His voice was deep. Not cold. Colder than that. Like stone, cracking under pressure. She blinked slowly. Her lips cracked when she spoke. "I didn't mean to." He tilted his head slightly. No one does. His eyes burned. Not gold, not silver. Amber, laced with something ancient. He stepped closer. The firelight caught the jagged scar that ran down his left shoulder, the kind of wound that doesn't come from sparring, that comes from war. His chest was bare, his arms inked with runes that pulsed faintly as he moved. He crouched beside her, eyes never leaving hers. "You smell like death," he said softly. "Packless, Markless. Forgotten. She said nothing. She didn't have to. He already knew. He reached forward, 2 fingers brushing her collarbone, right where the bond mark should have burned 7 times and failed, except something flickered beneath his touch. Not heat, not pain. A hum, like the beginning of a storm. Her breath caught. He felt it too. His jaw clenched. Then, calmly, too calmly, he said, "Tell me your name." She hesitated. "Riley." His eyes narrowed. He didn't repeat it, just let it settle. Then he stood and turned his back to her. "You'll rest here tonight. When you're strong enough, you'll decide if you want to live." She blinked. "What if I'm not strong enough?" He looked over his shoulder. His voice was steel. "Then the forest will finish what your pack started." She couldn't sleep that night, not because she was scared, but because something inside her had stirred for the first time in years. Her wolf. It wasn't much. Just a flicker. A whisper. But it was there. And it was watching him. The alpha of a land that didn't bow to anyone. No bond, no allegiance, no mercy. They called it Shadowmoor, the place the broken go to vanish. But maybe it was the only place the broken ever stood a chance. Hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Blood. The scent hit her before she even opened her eyes. Not hers, his. Thick, sharp, iron-rich, freshly spilled. She bolted upright, heart racing. The cave was empty. The fire was dead. And the floor where he'd crouched last night was darkened. Still wet. Riley stood too fast. The dizziness hit instantly. But she pushed through it. Because something was wrong. She stepped outside, barefoot on frozen rock, blinking against the early gray light. That's when she saw it. Him. Alpha Ruvan. Kneeling in the clearing, bare-chested again, but this time soaked in blood. His knuckles raw. Steam rising off his skin like smoke from a battlefield. 2 bodies at his feet. Wolves. Rogues. Bigger than most she'd ever seen. Both dead. Throats torn open. Ribs cracked outward. And still, Ruvan looked calmer than she'd ever seen him. Like this was his version of morning meditation. She froze. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to vanish back into the cave, to pretend she hadn't seen this. But he didn't give her the chance. "You sleep like the dead," he said, without looking at her. His voice was lower than last night, rougher, more wolf than man. She swallowed. "What happened?" "They were hunting," he replied, rising to his full height. "Not animals. Me." Riley's heart thudded. "But they were rogues." "No," he said, wiping the blood off his arm with a scrap of their fur. "They were Crescent Ridge Scouts, your old pack." Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. He looked at her then, full on, eyes burning with something unreadable. "They wanted proof you were dead. You weren't supposed to survive the exile." The words slammed into her like a backhand. She shook her head. "I didn't mean to cross into Shadowmoor. I wasn't trying to run." "I know," he said flatly. "They didn't care." He took a step toward her. She didn't move. Another step. Still. Until he was close enough for her to see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "They'll send more," he said. "Next time, they won't be scouts." Riley's voice cracked. "Why?" "Because they're afraid of what you are." "I'm not," she started, but he cut her off. "You shifted after 7 failed bonds. That's not weakness, girl. That's suppression. Your wolf's been chained." She went cold. "No one ever said—" "Of course they didn't," he snapped. "Because if you knew, you'd start asking why." She stared at him, his chest still rising from the fight, his eyes watching her like she was more dangerous than the bodies on the ground. "You think I saved you because I'm kind?" he asked. She stayed quiet. "I didn't," he said. "I saved you because you don't belong to their world, and neither do I." She blinked, confused. "Then what do I belong to?" He took another step forward. Closer now. Too close. "I don't know yet," he said. "But when I figure it out, I'll decide if you live." She flinched, instinct taking over. Her wolf surged forward, a flash of heat in her chest. Not a shift. Not yet. But it was there, alive, watching. She didn't know if it was protecting her or preparing to run. Ruvan's eyes flicked to her neck, the place where the bond mark usually forms. "You feel it," he said quietly. "Don't you?" She swallowed hard. Yes. She felt it. Like heat wrapped in wire. Like static against skin. Like a promise that didn't belong to her. "You're not supposed to feel anything," she said, shaking her head. "I've been rejected. The bond doesn't work." Ruvan's jaw tightened. Then slowly he leaned forward, not touching her, just close enough that she felt his breath against her cheek. "It's not a bond," he said. "It's a scar." That froze her. "A scar?" He pulled back. "Something was taken from you. Something old. Something deep. But the echo of it is still there." She blinked, confused. He turned, walking toward the bodies. "If you want answers," he said, "start asking better questions." He tossed her a blade. It landed in the snow at her feet. Old, heavy, rusted silver edge. "Start training," he said without looking back, "because this place won't protect you. And I don't do rescue twice." The next 3 days were brutal. He didn't go easy on her. Didn't care if she was hungry, or cold, or shaking from exhaustion. He pushed, hard, until her hands bled from the blade, until her muscles burned, until Mira, her wolf, started growling in her chest again. Louder, stronger. By the 4th night, she held the blade steady without shaking. That was when he started watching her differently. Not as prey, not as an experiment, but as a puzzle he couldn't solve. On the 5th morning, he spoke first. "Your wolf's not weak," he said. She nodded. "I know." "Then why hasn't she come out?" She looked at him, quiet, then answered the only way she could. "She's waiting for something." He didn't ask what, because they both already knew. That night, she dreamed again. The same burning city. The silver crown. The woman who looked like her, standing atop a blood-soaked altar, arms raised as the moon split in two above her head. When Riley woke, her hands were glowing, dim silver, fading fast, and on the inside of her wrist, a new mark. Not a bond, not a burn, a crest, something ancient, something forgotten. She covered it quickly, but it didn't matter, because he saw it, and for the first time, Alpha Ruvan looked afraid. Some wolves are born to follow, some are born to lead, and some were made to break the system entirely. She woke up choking, air thick in her lungs, chest heaving, vision blurred, the taste of metal on her tongue, and a sharp, searing pain crawling across the inside of her wrist. Not a wound, a mark, glowing, pulsing, silver. She yanked her arm into the furs, hiding it instinctively. The light faded, but the outline remained, faint, etched into her skin like it had always been there. She didn't breathe, didn't blink, because that wasn't a bond mark. That was a crest, an old one, One she'd only seen once, buried in a book she wasn't supposed to read, hidden in the Crescent Ridge archives, sealed under glass. The symbol of the vanished houses, dead bloodlines, lost for over a century, hunted to extinction. She was never meant to carry that, never meant to be that, but it was on her now, burned into her, claiming her. Behind her, footsteps echoed, slow, measured. She knew the sound before he stepped into view. Ruvan, the alpha of Shadowmoor, the man who fought like a beast and spoke like a blade. He stood in the arch of the cave, watching her with that same unreadable stare. He'd seen it, she could tell, even if he said nothing. Even if his face didn't move, he knew. "You didn't tell me," he said quietly. His voice was colder than the cave floor. "I didn't know," she shot back. Lie. And he knew it. He stepped closer, not threatening, not gentle, just inevitable, like gravity pulling her towards something she didn't understand. "Do you know what that symbol means?" he asked. She nodded once. "The House of Vera," she whispered. "The silver bloodline." He didn't blink. "They were erased." "I know. They were hunted. I know that too." He crouched down in front of her. His eyes flicked to her wrist, back to her face. "You shouldn't exist." Riley's voice was small, shaky. "Yeah, well, that makes two of us." Silence stretched between them, not hostile, heavy, like the quiet before an avalanche. Finally, he spoke again. "You've been suppressed." It wasn't a question. It was a truth, one that landed hard. Riley felt her throat tighten. "My wolf never came fully forward," she said. "No matter how hard I tried. I thought it was me." "No," he stood again. "It was never you." He turned his back to her, staring out toward the trees, voice low. "Someone caged her." Her heartbeat jumped. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "Get up. You're training in the river today." "What?" "You heard me. It's freezing." He looked over his shoulder. No one said surviving would be warm. The river was brutal. Ice-cracked banks, currents like knives, water black with shadow. She plunged in without hesitation, because this was how it worked with him. No permission, no comfort, no soft landings. Only force, only survival. Ruvan stood on the bank, arms crossed, watching, testing her, and she swam, fought, fell under, resurfaced, until her muscles burned and her lungs begged for air. But she kept going, because something inside her had snapped since the mark appeared, something wild, not angry, not scared, awake, and it wanted out. By dusk she collapsed on the river stones, shivering, exhausted, but alive. He walked toward her slowly, kneeling down beside her. Not close, but close enough. "You're not a mistake," he said. She blinked. "What?" "That's what they made you believe, isn't it? That you were the failure, the cursed one." She didn't answer. Didn't have to. He already knew. "But they lied." Her eyes stung. Not from the cold, not from the water, from the ache in her chest, the part of her that had been breaking for years and was finally starting to mend. Not because she'd been saved, but because she'd survived. Later that night, she found an old book in the corner of the cave, dusty, bound in leather, pages worn thin. She opened it and froze. Drawings, symbols, a map. One crest matched the one on her wrist. Below it, a name. Vera, keeper of the old blood. And beneath that, marked by the moon, bound by the first alpha. She didn't sleep after that, not a second, because the symbol wasn't just a mark of power, it was a target. The next morning, a raven landed outside the cave. It dropped something in the snow, a torn piece of black cloth, stamped with Crescent Ridge's crest. She picked it up with shaking fingers. Ruvan stepped behind her, his voice low. "They're coming." She turned slowly. "How do you know?" He pointed at the horizon, smoke rising, distant howls, closer than they should have been. "They found you." She gritted her teeth. "I'm not running again." He met her eyes. Finally, something changed in his voice. Approval. "Good." Then he handed her a blade. Long, silver-edged, balanced. "Then it's time you start fighting like the blood you carry." She took it without flinching. Because running was over. Rejection was over. She wasn't Packless anymore. She was something else. Something none of them were ready for. Some wolves are born to serve. Some are born to lead. But once in a generation, one is born to burn it all down. She felt it before he touched her. A pulse. A flicker. Like lightning trapped beneath her skin. Riley stumbled back, breath shallow, heart stuttering. "You felt that too," she said. Ruvan didn't answer. His eyes burned amber, fixed on her like he wasn't sure whether to kill her or claim her. The blade in her hand shook, not from fear. From something worse. Recognition. "No," she whispered. "It's not possible." She turned her wrist, looked at the crest. Still there. Still glowing faintly beneath the skin. He stepped closer. Slow. Measured. She didn't move. Couldn't. Because something was pulling at her chest. Tight. Hot. Unforgiving. Not a mate bond. Worse. Something older. "You're not supposed to have one," she said. "You told me. You don't do bonds." "I don't," Ruvan growled. "But this..." He reached out again, stopped just short of touching her. "Whatever this is, it's not a normal bond." Her skin tingled where his fingers hovered. She could hear her wolf now, Mira, pacing, snarling, clawing at her ribs. Not angry, hungry, craving something she didn't understand. "I've been rejected 7 times, she snapped. "The bond doesn't work for me." He narrowed his eyes. "That's because the bond wasn't meant for them." Her breath caught. He stepped back, turning away from her like the heat between them was something that could burn the trees. And maybe it could. Because this, whatever was forming in the air between them, it wasn't love. It wasn't fate. It was instinct. And it was dangerous. They didn't speak for hours after that. The air between them was heavy, coiled. She watched him train in silence, each movement sharp, brutal, efficient, like violence was second nature, like breathing. And yet for all his strength, she could feel it, the tension under his skin, the restraint. He was holding something back, just like she was. That night she dreamed again, not of the city, not of the crest, but of him, Ruvan, standing in the middle of a battlefield, wolves all around, blood in his hair, moonlight on his shoulders, and her, watching from the shadows, unable to move. She woke sweating, heart racing, the bond still humming low in her chest, and she hated it, hated how it made her feel seen, claimed, even if he hadn't touched her. The next morning she didn't wait for his command. She was already outside, blade in hand, eyes locked on him. "Fight me," she said. He raised a brow. "You're not ready." "I wasn't ready to be rejected 7 times either," she said, but it didn't stop anyone. He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "Don't hold back." "I wasn't planning to." The fight started quick. She struck first, low, fast, aiming for his ribs. He blocked, countered, moved like wind wrapped in iron. She ducked, spun, landed a hit, shallow, across his shoulder. His eyes darkened. Then he came at her like a storm. Not holding back, not playing teacher anymore. She fell, hard, rolled, recovered. He grabbed her arm, twisting, not enough to break it, just enough to make her flinch. She didn't. She headbutted him. They both stumbled back, breathing hard, sweat dripping, that thing between them sparking like a live wire. And still, neither of them stepped away. "You fight like someone who's tired of surviving," he said. She nodded. "I am. You want to live?" "No," she said. He frowned. She stepped closer. "I want to be dangerous." His smile was small, wicked, proud. "You already are." Later, she washed her hands in the river. Her reflection stared back at her. Same face, same eyes, but something behind them had changed. She wasn't a rejected mate anymore, wasn't just the girl they threw away. She was becoming something else. Something none of them could predict. That night, the wind changed. She smelled it first. Smoke, soot, metal, war. She ran outside. Ruvan was already there, standing at the tree line. His jaw clenched, shoulders rigid. "Scouts," he said. Her heart sank. "Crescent Ridge?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. In the distance, red flames, signal fires, warning flares. They were moving in, fast. Riley stood beside him, her blade in one hand, her wolf rising under her skin. They weren't going to run. Not this time. Behind them, the pack of Shadow Moor, wild, quiet, lethal, began to gather. Not a word spoken, just movement, readiness, loyalty. Not to Ruvan, not yet, but maybe to her, because they could feel it too. That old blood, that burning mark, that bond that shouldn't be. She looked at him. He looked back. And for a second, the world paused, just long enough for her to speak one sentence. "If I die tomorrow, I want to die fighting for something that's mine." Ruvan nodded once, voice low. "You're not dying." And then, without warning, he touched her wrist, right over the mark, and the moment he did, everything changed. The air exploded. A shockwave of light burst out from their skin, silver and amber, crackling through the trees like lightning. The wolves flinched. Some dropped. Others howled. And Riley? She didn't scream. She didn't fall. She stood still as the bond surged through her. Not like the others. Not a flicker. Not a spark. This was a claim. But not his. Not hers. Something bigger. Something old. Something the world had tried to erase. But it had returned. In them. Together. Some bonds are born. Some are made. And some are forged in fire. Built to break everything that came before them. The blade clattered to the dirt. She didn't drop it. Her hand just let go. Not from weakness, but because the sound that reached her ears shattered something inside her before her body could react. Crescent Ridge war horns, 2 of them, low, long, hollow. Not a warning, a declaration. They were coming, and they weren't hiding it. She turned to Ruvan, but he was already moving, shouting orders to wolves who didn't speak, only obeyed. The Shadowmoor pack moved like ghosts, silent, sharp, trained for one thing, to kill when the world came too close. Riley stood frozen in the center of the clearing, heart pounding hard against her ribs. This wasn't another exile. This was a hunt. and she was the target. She tried to speak, but her throat locked up. Because somewhere in her chest, beneath the heat of the claimed bond and the awakening crest, the old wound flared. 7 rejections, 7 alphas, 7 reasons to believe she'd never be worth protecting. So why now? Why this? Why were they coming with fire and war and sharpened claws? Now that she finally belonged to no one. Ruvan appeared beside her. He didn't ask if she was ready, didn't check if she was afraid. He just placed something in her hand, an old crest stone, chipped, cold. She looked down. It wasn't his. It was hers. The Vera mark, silver-etched, heavy, a symbol of bloodlines they'd buried, and were now marching to finish. "They're not here to take you back," he said. "They're here to erase the mistake." Her fingers tightened around the stone. "I was never a mistake." He nodded once. "Prove it." The forest changed before the first attack landed. The wind turned sharp. The birds vanished. Even the shadows seemed to scatter. And then, a howl. Close, high-pitched, then cut off mid-breath. One of theirs. Already down. Riley ran toward the sound without thinking. Ruvan didn't stop her. He followed. Through thick pines and sharp rock and blood-scented moss, they found the first scout. Throat ripped. Still warm. The second came from the trees. Claws bared, fangs snapping, and landed on her back before she saw him. Riley dropped flat, slammed her elbow into his rib cage, rolled, grabbed the dagger in her boot, and buried it in his chest. The impact knocked her breathless, but she stayed on her feet, covered in blood, alive. Ruvan watched from the shadows, not helping, not interfering, judging, testing. Her hands shook as she pulled the blade free, but her eyes didn't. When they got back to camp, 4 more bodies lay near the perimeter. Not Crescent Ridge, Shadowmoor wolves, on their own land, falling for a fight that wasn't theirs. Because of her. The next night, the storms rolled in. Heavy winds, no moon, and with them, a prisoner, dragged in by 2 of Ruvan's men, bleeding, snarling, Crescent Ridge uniform torn down the middle. Riley recognized him instantly. Kier, her childhood friend, the only one who used to sneak her food after training, who shared his furs when her shift left her too cold to sleep, who once promised he'd never let the pack break her. And here he was, bound, spitting blood, face twisted in something between guilt and fury. They threw him at her feet. Ruvan stood back, waiting, not interfering. Not this time. Kier looked up at her, and for the first time in years, she saw him without the veil of memory, not as the boy who gave her kindness in shadows, but as the wolf who never spoke once in her defense. "I didn't know," he said. "Lie. They told us you died. Another lie. They said you ran off with rogues. Not even creative." She crouched in front of him, looked him dead in the eye. "You watched them exile me." He looked away. "They would have turned on me too. So you let them bury me." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because silence was his answer back then. And silence was all she needed now. Ruvan stepped forward. "What do you want to do with him?" She didn't hesitate. "Let him live." Kier flinched. "What?" She stood, voice steady, flat. "Let him crawl back to them. Let him tell them I'm still alive. Let him tell them what's waiting if they come any closer." Ruvan nodded once and turned away. Kier's voice cracked behind her. "Riley." She didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't look back. Because that name, didn't belong to him anymore. That night, as the camp slept with one eye open, she sat by the fire, the crest stone warm in her palm. It pulsed when she squeezed it. She could feel it now. Her wolf, stronger, louder, no longer caged, no longer begging. Mira was rising, and soon, she'd be free. The war hadn't started yet, but something inside her already had. Not vengeance, not survival, reckoning. Some betrayals break you, some awaken you, and some, like the one Crescent Ridge made, light a fire that nothing can put out. The scent of smoke clung to her skin, not from battle, from ritual, cedar, burnt sage. Old ash rising from the fire pit in the center of Shadowmoor's clearing. This wasn't a ceremony of celebration. It was a warning. To them, to her, to the wolves that once spat her out like bone dust. Riley stood between two burning columns, barefoot, unarmed, shoulders back. The firelight caught the edges of her silver crest, still faint, still healing, but visible now. Accepting its place, claiming its space. And Ruvan? He stood across from her. No armor, no shirt, markings down his chest glowing faintly under moonlight. His expression unreadable, not soft, not cruel, just certain. Because this wasn't about choosing her. He wasn't offering. He was declaring. The old wolf stepped forward, blind, wrinkled, his voice rough as bark. The mark is older than pack law, older than blood. It cannot be asked for. It cannot be undone. He held the ceremonial dagger between them, silver blade, twisted handle, bound with red thread. Ruvan took it first, cut a line across his palm. The blood didn't drip. It seeped. Slow, dark. He stepped forward, stopped a breath away, held out his hand. She stared at it, at him, at the alpha who didn't want to mate, didn't believe in bonds, and yet here he was, offering the mark. "You don't have to accept it," he said. The words were low, rough, but real. "I didn't bring you here to bind you. I brought you here because they fear you." She looked up into his eyes. No lies, no promises, just truth. "You brought me here," she whispered, "because I survived." His jaw clenched, and then she took the blade, cut her own palm, stepped into the bond. The second their blood touched, the fire exploded, not outward, upward. Straight into the sky, a tower of flame that roared so loud the forest stopped breathing. Wolves dropped to their knees. The wind died. And Riley didn't flinch. She felt the burn shoot up her arm, across her shoulder, into her chest. And then it stopped. Settled. Became still. The crest on her wrist flared once, then disappeared. Buried. Claimed. She wasn't his mate. She was his equal. And the bond? It didn't form like the old ways. It didn't latch. It didn't bind. It echoed, through the trees, through the pack, through the wolves who had never bowed to anyone, until now. But peace didn't last. Not that night. Not in Shadowmoor. Because just as the ceremony ended, just as the fire dimmed, something sharp hit the back of her neck. Not pain. A pulse. She spun, eyes narrowing, and saw it. A figure standing at the tree line, too still. Too calm, Crescent Ridge armor, holding a black-banded arrow, blood on his sleeve, and in his other hand, a pendant, Riley's old sigil, the one they tore from her chest the night they cast her out. Ruvan moved fast, but not fast enough. The scout turned and vanished into the dark, too quick to follow, too quiet to track. But he hadn't come to kill. He'd come to watch, to confirm. And now? They knew. She stood at the edge of the flames, watching the last of the sparks fade into the dirt. Every eye in Shadowmoor was on her, but she didn't feel exposed. She felt seen. For the first time in her life, she wasn't a mistake. She was a message. One they were going to send back, loud, clear, and final. Later that night, Ruvan found her at the river's edge. The moon low, the water quiet. She didn't turn when he approached, didn't speak. Just let the silence hang, until finally he broke it. They'll come sooner than we thought. I know. You could still run. I know that too. He stepped closer. This wasn't supposed to happen. She smiled faintly. Neither was I. He reached for her hand, not to hold it, to show her something. There on his palm, where her blood had touched, a burn was forming. Silver, not a bond, a mark, hers. She looked down at her own palm. Nothing, just healed skin, because whatever had passed between them, it didn't need to leave a scar on her. It had become her. She didn't sleep, not that night, not with the trees so quiet, not with the mark still humming in his hand, not with Crescent Ridge watching from the shadows, waiting, calculating, preparing. But they weren't the only ones watching anymore, because something older had stirred. In the soil, in the sky, and in the blood now running through her veins. Some marks are worn like chains. Some marks are worn like crowns. But hers? Hers was never meant to be worn. It was meant to be unleashed. The first explosion shattered the silence just after moonrise. No warning, no scent, just fire. Heat slammed through the southern ridge. Flames tore up the tree line. Smoke curled over the clearing thick and fast. Riley didn't flinch. She stood at the edge of the Shadowmoor camp, eyes locked on the trees. They were here, not scouts, not spies, wolves, armored, armed, marching under the Crescent Ridge banner. Their formation was tight, controlled. They weren't charging. They weren't raging. They were executing. A pack trained for order, precision, domination, and they were walking straight into her territory. Ruvan moved first. No command, no growl, just one motion. Hand raised, blade drawn. The Shadowmoor wolves scattered like smoke into the trees, silent, unseen, predators waiting to bleed intruders dry. But Riley? She didn't move, because she saw him. Jackson. At the front of the formation, his shoulders broad, his eyes cold, no hesitation, no guilt, no memory of the girl he'd once promised to choose, only duty. He saw her too. Their eyes locked across the fire-lit ridge. No words, no recognition, just confirmation. She was still alive, and now she was in his way. The first clash came seconds later. Fangs, steel, flesh. Riley ran into the fight without waiting for permission. She didn't ask for orders. She wasn't a soldier. She was the reason this war started. And she was going to be the reason it ended. She reached the front line fast, took down the first Crescent wolf with a blade through the thigh and a crack to the jaw. The second lunged. She ducked under, slashed him behind the knee, dropped him cold. The third? She shifted, only halfway. Her eyes went silver. Her hands snapped into claws. Not full wolf. Something in between. Something they'd never seen before. Jackson finally moved, straight toward her, blade in one hand, fire rune in the other. He didn't speak until he was close enough to strike. "You should have stayed dead." She blocked his blade. "7 rejections," she growled. But this is the first time I'm rejecting you." He swung hard. She ducked, countered, hit him clean across the ribs. He stumbled back, eyes wide for a split second. Not because of pain, because he felt it too. The bond spark. Still flickering. Still alive. After all this time. After everything. He hesitated. That was all she needed. She dropped him to his knees. Blade pressed to his throat. The fire behind them cracked louder. Screams echoed. Wolves fell. And still, she didn't move. Didn't drive the blade in. Because she saw it. In his eyes. Not hate. Not anger. Regret. He spoke first. "I didn't want to do it. You did it anyway. I was protecting you." Riley froze. The lie hit her like a slap. Then he said something worse. "Your parents." She pressed the blade tighter. "Don't. I know what happened to them." Her breath caught. The world tilted. Jackson's voice dropped. "They didn't die in an accident. They were hunted, the same way you are now." She wanted to scream, wanted to tear it out of him. But then, another voice cut through the trees. Lissa. Jackson's mate. His second. His betrayal. She stepped into view, blood on her claws, smiling like a snake. "Well," she purred, "isn't this cozy?" Ruvan appeared behind her like a ghost, grabbed her by the throat, lifted her clean off the ground. She gurgled, kicked, but didn't beg. Because even as she choked, she grinned. "Too late," she rasped. "They know. They all know." Ruvan dropped her. She hit the dirt coughing, scrambling away. Riley lowered the blade from Jackson's throat. He didn't run, didn't fight. He looked at her with something she couldn't place. Not love, not pity, maybe shame. And then he turned and vanished into the fire in the trees. The battlefield fell silent, smoke rising, bodies still, and Riley just stood there, breathing hard, heartbreaking. Later, when the wounded were tended and the dead were counted, Ruvan came to her. No words, just an envelope, torn, burnt at the edges. Inside, a letter, old, written in her mother's handwriting. She didn't need to read it all to understand. They knew, years ago, who she was, what she carried, the crest, the mark, the reason the world wanted her gone. She wasn't rejected because she was weak. She was rejected because she was dangerous. And now? Now it was too late to bury her, because she wasn't hiding anymore. She was rising. Some wars are fought for land, some for pride. But the ones that burn the longest are the ones fought over what should have never been forgotten. Chains rattled in the dark, not loud, not sharp, worse, slow, like whoever wore them wasn't fighting anymore. Riley stepped into the cave before her courage caught up. The torch in her hand shook, flames throwing twisted shadows across damp stone. The scent hit her first. Old blood, burned herbs, and something wrong. Magic, heavy, ancient, broken. The wolf on the ground was barely human, cloaked in rags, wrists bound, face hidden by her tangled hair. But Riley knew, even before the chains glowed, even before the pulse in her palm throbbed harder. She knew who it was, the wolf who was supposed to be dead. Her aunt, Malene, the one who held her when she was a baby, the one who vanished the night her parents died, the one they buried in an empty coffin. Malene lifted her head slowly and smiled. No guilt, no shock, just satisfaction. "As pretty as they said," she rasped, and marked. Riley didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe, because her bones had gone cold. Malene wasn't shackled by accident. This was containment. wards carved into the stone, runes burned into her skin. This was someone too dangerous to kill, too dangerous to leave free. "I watched them drag your mother's body from the fire," Malene said. "She screamed your name before the end." Riley's jaw clenched. "She trusted you." Malene tilted her head. "She trusted everyone. That was her curse." Riley stepped forward. The torchlight caught the silver marks on Malene's wrists. Vera symbols, twisted, inverted, poisoned. "You're one of us," Riley whispered. Malene's smile dropped. "No. I saw the crest. I was one of you." "What changed?" Malene leaned forward, chains creaking. "Your mother." The torch flickered. Wind from nowhere rushed through the tunnel. Malene's voice dropped. "She chose peace. She chose secrecy. She chose to let our power die in the dark." Riley didn't blink. "She chose to protect me. She chose to keep you weak." Silence wrapped around them, heavy. Then Malene's voice dropped lower. "The old blood wasn't meant to be hidden. It was meant to rule." Riley stepped closer. The fire dimmed. Something old stirred in the stones. "You had me drugged." "Yes." The teas, the pills, the shampoos, all laced, all designed to suppress the wolf inside you. Riley swallowed hard and still didn't look away. "You spent your life making sure I'd never rise." Malene smiled again. "No, I spent my life making sure I would." The words landed like a knife. Then Malene stood, chains stretching, runes flaring. "Your power was meant to belong to me," she said. "You were just the vessel." Riley stepped back. The stone under her boots trembled. "You're insane." "No," Malene hissed. "I'm prepared." From the back of the chamber, a second presence stirred. Not footsteps. Breath. Raspy. Deep. Familiar. And when the figure stepped into the light, Riley's knees locked, because she knew that face too. Ethan, her foster father, the man who raised her, held her hand when her wolf wouldn't shift, told her bedtime stories about forgotten bloodlines, lied to her every day of her life. "You knew," she said. He didn't deny it. "I was ordered to protect the bloodline," Ethan said, "not nurture it." "You were there the night my parents died." He nodded. "You let me believe it was an accident. It was cleaner that way. You helped suppress me. Because if you'd awakened early," he looked away, "we wouldn't have been able to control you." The torch dropped from her hand, hit the ground, sputtered out. But she didn't need light anymore. The rage was enough. Mira, her wolf, surged up her spine, snarling, writhing, unleashed. Riley didn't shift. She didn't have to. The air around her pulsed. The silver crest across her wrist lit up like a brand. The ground cracked under her feet. Malene stepped forward, laughing. "You feel it now, don't you? The blood, the inheritance, the power." "You kept me caged," Riley growled. Malene spread her arms. "And look how strong you are now." Behind her, Ethan backed away. The wards trembled, the walls shook. And Riley? She reached out, placed her hand on the chain between Malene's wrists, and snapped it. The mark on her palm flared. The metal screamed, and the entire mountain groaned. Malene stumbled back, shocked. The chains lay on the ground, smoking, melted at the core. "You freed me?" she whispered. "No," Riley said softly. "I judged you." And then she raised her hand and stripped the wolf out of Malene's body. The scream that followed wasn't human, wasn't wolf. It was something older, something that should have stayed buried, but it broke. And when it did, Malene collapsed, Her aura gone, her wolf gone, a human shell in a cold cage, powerless, forever. Riley turned to Ethan. His face was pale, but she didn't touch him, didn't lift a finger. She looked him in the eyes and said 4 words, "I was never yours," then walked out, back through the tunnels, past the shattered wards, up into the night air, where the wind howled and the trees bent and the stars blinked like they finally saw her clearly. She didn't feel victorious. She didn't feel safe. She felt empty. Because the betrayal wasn't just from the pack, it was from the people who pretended to love her. The ones who made her believe she'd been saved, when really, they'd been building her cage one lie at a time. But now there were no more chains, no more stories, no more shadows. Just her, and whatever was coming next. Some chains are meant to hold you down. Some are meant to keep you blind. But the ones she broke? They were forged to stop the world from ever knowing what she really was. The sky cracked open. Not lightning, not a storm. Something else. Something ancient. Something alive. Riley stood at the edge of the cliff, cloak torn, arms bare, crest burning beneath her skin. Shadowmoor was behind her. The armies were in front, and between them all, the bond. Ruvan bled beside her, one hand gripping his side, the other pressed to the stone that pulsed with her mark. His wolf had taken 2 arrows, still standing, still breathing, but barely. "You shouldn't be here," she said. His voice was broken glass. "You made me come." Across the ridge, Crescent Ridge had gathered. Alpha Jaren at the front, Jackson and Lissa behind him. But this time, no silver robes, no ritual blades, just war. Lines of wolves drawn from 3 allied packs, runes painted down their spines, bows strung, shields raised, ready to erase what Riley had become. But they didn't understand. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about what had awakened, what they'd tried to bury, what they feared. The bond inside her pulsed like a second heartbeat. Not just hers, not just Ruvan's, a new bond, older than the mate laws, stronger than bloodlines. It had chosen them both, not for love, not for power, for balance. The wind rose. Riley raised her hand. The mark flared, silver light streaking from her wrist into the air like a signal. It caught on the trees, lit the stones, brought the earth to a low hum, and then the wolves stopped moving, every single one, because something stepped out of the forest behind them. Not a wolf, not a man, a being made of shadow and silver fire, wearing the form of the first alpha, eyes like moons, skin flickering with all the crests that came before. The guardian of the old bond, the protector of the bloodlines they tried to erase. And it bowed to Riley. The enemy broke. Half dropped to their knees, the other half ran. And Jackson? He stayed standing, staring at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "I thought I was protecting you," he whispered. She didn't answer. She didn't need to, because the bond inside her, the one she had forged with Ruvan, had already rewritten the rules. Ruvan staggered, dropped to one knee. She moved to him instantly, caught his arm, held him steady. His eyes met hers, blood trailing from the corner of his mouth. "Are we dying?" "No." Her voice was steady now, calm. "We're just becoming what we were always meant to be." She knelt beside him, pressed her forehead to his, their marks aligned. It spilled out across the valley, the trees bowed, the river split, and the bond shattered. Not from breaking, from evolving, from something forced by fate into something chosen by soul. It didn't bind them anymore. It freed them, and through that freedom, the world changed. Wolves across the mountains felt the pulse. Mate bonds flickered, some faded, some reignited, some broke cleanly, without pain. Because the laws had changed. The old rules burned. The power was no longer in tradition. It was in choice. The army turned to retreat. Crescent Ridge fled. The war ended without a final blow. And Riley? She stood, hand in Ruvan's, mark still glowing, but no longer burning. Not a curse, not a chain, a reminder of what had been lost, of what had been reclaimed. They returned to Shadowmoor in silence. No cheers, no celebration, just breath and peace. In the weeks that followed, word spread of a girl with no pack who changed the bond itself, of a ruthless alpha who bled beside her, of a new law, not written in blood, but etched in choice. They didn't crown her. She didn't want that. But they came from every pack, every bloodline, even those who had once rejected her. They came not to bow, but to ask, to learn, to remember. And Riley? She stood at the edge of the world, cloak whipping in the wind, not as a mate, not as a victim, not even as a leader, just as herself, unbound, unbroken, unstoppable. Some bonds are forged by destiny, some by power, but the ones that change the world are made by choice.